Hello, kids. Welcome to the Kapitol Life podcast. I am your host, Abby Pagood, and this is where we talk about all the things, the good things, the bad things, and the healthy things. And today's episode is called Slipping into the Sun because it's sunny. Get it? Yes? No? Okay. So, of course, the dog days of summer are here. And what more appropriate way than to celebrate than with Top Dog Pet Sitters? They are a tremendous company that watches your pet, come rain, come shine. And it doesn't matter if you're leaving for vacation or when vacation is, if you have an emergency, they are fantastic. They are the top people that we trust to watch our pets anytime we go out of town and we have to leave our dogs at home. These are the people to call. So being that it's summer and a lot of us are about to travel, I would highly suggest going and making an appointment today at topdogpetsitters.com. So today's subject is a little bit more interesting because I want to talk about like flip it into the sun. We sit here, I'm really looking forward to the fact that it's summer. Those of you that are watching me live, I'm not sure that if you can see, but I have a little hormone blemish around the eye. So it kind of would be really nice to get some sun, kind of clear up my pores a little bit. And then that way I don't have to wear as much makeup, save money over the summer by not having to wear as much makeup because you got a great tan and all of those things. Now, a lot of us, we are really aware of skin cancer being a big thing to sun exposure, and so therefore we need to wear SPF. That is like super, super important. We need to make sure and do that. But what we really need to make sure and focus on as well is the importance of why sun exposure is a really big deal. So we're going to go into that a little bit tonight. But before we start, I just want you guys to make sure and go and visit capitalhealth.com because this year we have t-shirts, we have tanks, we have oils for ailment issues, we even have programs. It's summer. If you want to start working that itsy bitsy teeny weeny bikini, you need to go work some finer assets and some core blast, and you can use promo code the Kapitol Life and get $15 off every program, not just one program, but all programs. And on top of it, you can get really cute tanks that says fart like a vegan, or I hope tacos think about me as much as I think about them. And funny things like I'm sorry what I said during my workout. So cute little tanks and tees, all shapes and sizes, all nice, fun colors. And go to the website, check it out. They're super adorable. Okay, so we are going to get really into what is it, right? The dog days of summer, it is longer hours, right? So we have much longer days. I think like the longest day of summer is coming up on June 21st, which is considered, like the summer solstice, right? And this can be really good, and it also can be really bad because a lot of times we get really excited. We feel like our days are a lot longer. So we actually feel like we accomplish more. We feel like, okay, we get up, we start our day nice and early. We might even actually get workouts in, get all of our work done, and even have a little playtime with some friends and family. But then at the end point, we notice we're not sleeping as much, right? The heat starts picking up, so we're a little bit more exhausted because our dehydration levels are a little bit off. And then in addition to that, we're not sleeping as much because the sun is staying up later. So sometimes I find myself running around the house, getting the kids, trying to get the kids settled for whatever activity. And then I turn around and realize I haven't fed anybody yet. And it's probably 8:30, 9 o'clock. And I'm like, oh crap, I got to make dinner. So in our house, what ends up happening is we end up eating a lot later unintentionally because we find that we're very super active. But what also ends up happening is because of the heat and because of the long extended days, we end up finding ourselves that we're not as hungry. So we end up underfueling ourselves. And then sometimes that can leave us feeling a little peaky from time to time. So the reason why I bring this up is because sometimes the awareness of the dehydration, the awareness of the longer days, not sleeping as much, and the awareness of not fueling yourself throughout the day, those things you can change right now before they even become a problem. So I would suggest, instead of having your big meals, just start grazing. And then that way you're not you're not as hungry during the day, but at grazing you can at least eat, keep yourself fueled, but then also not feel so full that you become like nauseous and can't do anything. Okay? So, as we talk about flipping into the sun, we love to talk about vitamin D. What is vitamin D? Well, they are pro-hormones. So they're like a precursor for hormones, right? Which is kind of a really important subject of what we need to be thinking about. Um, in addition to, it's metabolized in its biologically active form, which means really what's going on is like you're either consuming it through nutrition, which there's not a steady lot of it available in food. I know that some of the foods that I'll recommend today, I can't even eat half of them or don't want to eat half of them because some of them I don't like. But on a side point, a lot of it's through the sun, is through our sun exposure. So whenever we consume it via internally into our body, or if we get it synthesized from the sun, like through our skin, it goes into the bloodstream and then it gets transported all the way to our liver. Oh, are you guys listening? Did you hear me say the word liver again? I feel like I'm starting to repeat this. I feel like maybe we should have some kind of cowbell that we ring every time Abby says the word liver, because the liver is so important for your body and we really need to pay attention to all of its major benefits. So, again, let's get out our liver books and write down another thing that it does. Vitamin D gets transported and then the liver processes it, and then it starts helping with our functions. And what kind of functions are those? So we have things like gene transcription, which I don't think I need to remind any of you that we've had a very serious, what year are we on? 2.5 years of discussion of mRNA, which mRNA is the blueprint of our DNA, which is connected to our genes. So if gene transcription is a thing that vitamin D assists, I think that might be really important. Yeah? Okay. We also have vitamin D that helps with increasing our calcium uptake and reabsorption. So, I mean, it's two totally different things. So if you think about calcium going into your bloodstream, right? So you eat, you digest your calcium, and it comes into your body, and then your body decides to take it, okay? So your body decides to take it. If the vitamin D isn't in there, if we don't have enough vitamin D in there, it can't be attracted. And so then therefore you're going to find yourself calcium deficient because you're vitamin D deficient. And we all know that as that calcium absorption depletes, it leads to things like osteoporosis, right? Which a lot of us females have a tendency to lead into that direction, especially with our genes. So let's focus on vitamin D intake is super important because our calcium uptake, meaning that attractiveness that calcium has, in addition to its ability to get reabsorbed in our system, okay? So the more you increase your vitamin D levels, the more you're able to kind of get the best of both worlds when it comes to calcium absorption, right? Now, you're also going to have cell differentiation. This is a word I had this week. I talked to my daughter. There are words that Abby cannot say. There's not a lot of them. I think there's two. I can't remember what one of them is because I honestly don't use it that much. And the other one is hold on, let me try it again. Differentiate. Okay, right? Differentiation. So cell differentiation. Oh, so funny. Okay, things I cannot say. It's super entertaining. I love laughing at myself. So that is something that's a really key, important thing of being able to address the important things, different things that your cells need in production, right? And another thing is immune system. Is that another thing from the last 2 years that all of us have learned to pay attention to is our immune system. So vitamin D helps with our immune system. On top of that, I think some of you are going to really like this. Do you remember how we talked about in previous podcasts about insulin deficiency and the body's inability to process glucose? Do you guys remember that? If you guys haven't heard it, just a brief description. If you are carrying your weight around that belly, that is a key indicator that you have a glucose intolerance. It's hard for you to process glucose, right? Glucose meaning sugar / carbs, right? So vitamin D helps regulate glucose tolerance. So that can actually aid in helping regulate some of those issues. So it might be a good idea to get out in the sun. And last but not least, one of the awesome key tips that vitamin D does is it helps regulate your blood pressure. So all really good things. Blood pressure right now is kind of at an all-time high because some people a lot of my clients actually that have gotten vaccinated in the last couple years, they have actually started struggling with blood pressure, and it hasn't been a peak of blood pressure or a low peak. It's been either one. Okay. So they went from having very steady blood pressure, not really being too stressful people in general. And then now all of a sudden they're finding themselves either having a huge dive into blood pressure and having a hard time maintaining it. And then others have had it kind of skyrocket. Also, stress levels have an effect on our blood pressure, right? So that is something that might be really important. Hey, it's sunny outside. Let's take 10 minutes just to go out and absorb some of those nutrients. So when you don't have time to go outside and absorb some of those nice vitamin D nutrients, how else can you get it? You can get it in your food. So some of the foods that contain them are eggs. Okay. It's egg yolk primarily that has the vitamin D. Now, a lot of you guys will try and get rid of your egg yolk to kind of reduce your cholesterol intake. And you'll also get rid of that egg yolk because you're trying to eat more of a leaner egg and you don't want to have too many saturated fats, which is a great thing. However, the vitamin D is primarily in that egg yolk. So then that way you're kind of missing out. I cannot consume eggs because I have a food intolerance that's so bad that eggs make me feel like I was like beaten and stabbed in a freaking alley and just left to die because it just hurts. So I refrain from eating eggs, but that does not mean that I can't get my vitamin D somewhere else because I can get it in my salmon, and I love salmon, okay? Salmon, sardines, not a fan of those. Mackerel, not a fan of that either. And any fortified foods that have fortified vitamin D in it, aka primarily milk, which I also am dairy free. But there are other foods that have been expanded across the board to fortify their foods with vitamin D to make sure that people aren't as vitamin D deficient. However, a lot of people don't seek that out when they're selecting foods because they're constantly not really thinking about it. So maybe this is something for the next time you go to the grocery store. Check out your foods, find out which ones have fortified vitamin D in it, and then that can help you, especially if you're someone that's on the go and don't get to go outside that much. So why is this all important? What ends up happening? One, how do we know that we're lacking the vitamin D in the first place? Okay, well, everybody, once they hit a certain age, they go and get their blood work done, and then they have that little sheet that the doctor says, and it has the ranges from yada, 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 that says normal or under blah. And sometimes it's very helpful. And sometimes, depending on the hospital you go to or the doctor that you go to, their window of healthy is kind of misleading. It's not necessary. Like by the time you hit the edges of those lines, it's already in bad state. And then it takes twice the amount of effort to get back to optimal. So I would rather just say, hey, what's optimal levels? Let's stay right there and make sure that we're all good. because the last thing we need is having the deficiency symptoms that set in, which in children, and this is kind of interesting. This one I find really interesting. I learned this back in school a long time ago. If you watched last week's episode, you know how old I am. I have no problem with my age, but I will not tell you what my age is unless you go back and listen to the podcast from last week. And then you'll know. So in children that are vitamin D deficiency, one of the primary things that can happen is rickets, okay? Now, some of you may or may not know what rickets is. It was a huge takeoff in rickets in the 1920s because it was like the beginning of the Great Depression. So a lot of children were not, you were slim pickings with food selection. So on top of it, a lot of companies didn't start fortifying food with vitamin D until rickets became a really big problem and actually started becoming almost like another epidemic, and people were starting to freak out about it. And rickets is like when the bone's not getting enough of its nutrients, and it's not, obviously we've already discussed that when vitamin D is in your system, it can attract the calcium absorption to help promote growth, which when ends up happening is when you're not getting enough vitamin D, it's not absorbing the calcium. And so the bones actually start building in like a deformed nature. So what ends up happening is you end up getting like a bowed out kind of look to it, in addition to like crickety walking. So a lot of these people are trying to make sure, and like they're trying to make sure they're getting their vitamin D, but they're not really aware. So it was the 1920s. They're trying to eat on a budget. Some of them are stuck at like soups and having to get things that was like stand in line for food just to get nutrients. So a lot of times they weren't even getting it. So rickets became a really big deal in the 1920s. And then after it started becoming a really big problem, companies started fortifying their products with it, what was one of the primary things that people consumed on a regular basis? The milkman. So they started fortifying vitamin D a lot into our milk products. And so that's why a lot of people, when they sit there and like drink your calcium, it wasn't just drink your calcium, it's because your vitamin D was in there as well. Now, over the years, people have actually become dairy intolerant. And the reason why they become dairy intolerant is because dairy has been added into not nutrient, but product after product. So for my own personal story to explain, and not to expose anybody else, I'll just use myself as an example. I consumed milk and eggs and all such of things for years with no problem whatsoever. After my first child was born, I ended up having a adverse reaction to it, but not knowing it. So I was still consuming it on a regular. Well, come to find out that my bread had milk in it, my protein powder had milk in it, even my protein bar that I like to consume, even when I had a slice of cheese or had yogurt. And I found that the products that I was eating, I was getting like 8 doses of it a day. Now, we talked about before in a previous podcast about how lactase enzymes help absorb lactose, which is the primary ingredient of dairy derivatives. What ends up happening is, as you get older, the lactase enzymes deplete, which is why a lot of adults start to become lactose intolerant. So when that happens, you really need to pay attention to like, oh, I need to limit my dairy intake. It doesn't mean you have to stop it altogether. People that become lactose intolerant need to, because it'll just come in and it'll go out. But people that can still tolerate a certain amount, or maybe they can handle their frozen yogurt or their ice cream, but they can't have dairy as a, like straight source, okay? So it just depends on the person, but it means that we have to limit it. So my recommendation to any individuals on a bottom line basis when it comes to nutrition is do not consume more than 2 servings of dairy a day. Okay? 2 servings of dairy a day, that's all you get. Now, that can be hard to end up getting some of your fortified vitamin D, which is another reason why sun exposure is important. So you have in kids, they can get rickets, they can have their deformed bones, they can have underdeveloped growth which can be leading into retardation and those disabilities, in addition to soft teeth, which, ouch, that just kind of hurts my mind thinking about soft teeth. In adults, we will see this in osteomalacia. We'll also see it in softening bones, spontaneous fractures, and we'll also see it in tooth decay. So if you don't want your tooth to start looking like George Washington in the wood tooth, then I'd probably start making sure that you get your vitamin D in, which is probably a good idea. So anyway. All right, guys, if you have not followed us or you have followed us and you love what's going on and what we have to say, please share the podcast because we love to spread the word out there. We really want to debunk a lot of the noise out there that is going around, really make sure that you're fully educated. You understand the concepts of all of the things, the good, the bad, and the healthy, and all that life brings to all of us through each phase of life. And we really want to make sure we spread that word to our viewers and to your loved ones, because the most important thing is making sure that our loved ones are taken care of and they're getting the information that they need to take care of themselves. Last but not least, we have to make sure that you guys are aware that you can still become a Kapitol Health founder today. My app, the Kapitol Health app, is going to be coming out very soon. We are still running deals on becoming a founder. It gets you a t-shirt. It gets you the stretching out program. It also gets you discounts on a year basis when the app comes out, and it is set to come out this summer. So we will be getting that to you. And I just have to say, thank you guys so much for joining me on the Kapitol Life podcast. Please join me next Saturday at 5:30, because you guys know I always run a little bit late, but 5:30. For those of you who can't see me, I'm doing air quotes over the 5:30. And join me because we are going to do, the title is Macho Man. And the reason why we're talking about Macho Man is because we're celebrating Daddy's Day. And what better way to do Daddy's Day celebration than with Men Health Awareness Day? Because it's just such a good idea, right? Men's health is important to us, because where would we be without our big, strong men? So don't forget to like and subscribe, share. You can follow us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Facebook. Basically, we're going to work towards getting towards all of the platforms. And last but not least, remember to take care of yourself, because you're somebody's everything. Have a great day, guys. Take care.